Alright, so here's where it all starts. 10 days ago, I was an average guy, living what I thought was an average life with my wife, Julia. I'm lying in a hospital bed with more tubes in me than a science experiment, and a pounding headache that feels like my skull's been through a blender. I've barely come out of a 10-day coma, and everything's still fuzzy, like I'm seeing through static on an old TV. The nurse gently tells me I had a severe head injury, a fall, she says, as if that explains everything. Then Detective Green shows up, a guy with a serious look and a notepad full of questions. He sits beside my bed, asks if I remember anything about the incident. That's when it starts coming back to me. I remember walking into my own house after returning early from a work trip. The lights were dim, but I caught Julia in a too-close conversation with some hulking guy I'd never seen before. He was huge, the type that could be a nightclub bouncer, easily intimidating. And Julia? She looked guilty, panicked. Before I could say much, that guy, her lover, turned on me. I barely got a word out before he started throwing punches. He beat me so badly I could barely see straight. The last thing I remember is lying at the bottom of the stairs, my vision fading to black. Green's face is grim when I finish telling him this. Then, the bombshell. Turns out that brute wasn't just some random fling. Julia had hired him. She promised him a cut of my life insurance and inheritance if he'd finish the job. That man was supposed to kill me. So here I am, barely able to sit up, and Green's laying out the truth like it's just another case. But this isn't some true crime podcast. This is my life we're talking about. Green's still going, explaining how Julia tried to spin a story about me tripping down the stairs. She actually thought she could waltz in here, collect the insurance, and that'd be the end of it. But I guess she didn't count on me clinging to life, or on Green digging deeper. Apparently, Julia's been acting weird, even tried to convince the hospital staff not to let anyone visit me, claiming it was doctor's orders. Green's eyebrows knit together when he says it, and I can tell he's disgusted too. But he's holding back, like there's something worse. I know this is a lot, Jackson, he says, his voice steady, like he's giving me time to process. But there's something else you should know. Turns out, Julia's been messing around for a while with a guy named Jimmy. Jimmy the Ham, they call him, as if he's some kind of bad movie villain. Green hands me a photo of this guy, some grainy black and white shot that looks like it came out of a police archive. There he is, hulking, a brute of a guy with a smug grin plastered across his face. Apparently, he's got a record a mile long. Assaults, fraud, threats, you name it. And Julia, my wife, the woman I'd been with for nearly a decade, had brought him into my home and set him loose on me. I try to picture the past few months. The late nights she'd explained away with vague excuses, the mysterious phone calls, the random girls' nights she'd never had before. The worst part? I thought she was just unhappy, maybe going through some kind of phase. I never dreamed she'd go this far. Then Green tells me something that nearly knocks the wind out of me. He's already watched the footage from cameras I'd set up before that trip. It was supposed to be a security thing, a precaution because I'd been hearing strange noises around the house. I guess, deep down I'd been suspicious, but I chalked it up to paranoia. I never thought those cameras would capture my wife plotting my murder with another man. Green hesitates, then places a hand on my shoulder. Jackson, you're lucky you're here. If he'd hit you any harder, he lets the sentence trail off. I know what he means. My head's spinning, half from the meds and half from the sheer weight of what I'm hearing. My own wife. My partner. Trying to take me out for money. I feel the anger start to build, boiling up from somewhere deep inside, hotter and more intense than anything I've ever felt. Green seems to notice because he gives me a firm nod. Look, you don't have to face this alone, he says, setting his hand on the bed's edge. We're gonna make sure she doesn't get away with any of it. At that moment, all I want is revenge. To make sure she knows exactly what she's lost. Green's got this look in his eye, like he's about to lay down the final piece of the puzzle. He pulls a small laptop out of his bag and sets it on the tray table beside my hospital bed. We have a copy of the footage, he says, his voice low. I want you to see what we're dealing with. But only if you're ready. I nod, maybe a little too quickly. I need to see it. I need to know exactly what kind of person I was married to for all these years. Green clicks a few keys, and the screen flickers to life. The video is in black and white, a clear shot of my living room from a camera I'd hidden in the ceiling vent. I can see Julia pacing around, looking annoyed, tapping her nails on the back of the couch. Then the door opens and there he is, Jimmy the Ham, all muscle and tattoos, his face twisted in that same smug grin from the photo. He's comfortable, like he's been in my home 100 times. "What are you doing?" Julia snaps at him, hands on her hips. There's no affection, no warmth, just this businesslike impatience. She looks more annoyed than anything else. He waves her off, muttering something I can't make out, and grabs a beer from my fridge. My fridge. That twisted my stomach. He takes his time, lounging around like he owns the place, until Julia finally throws her hands up and says, "Enough with the games, Jimmy. You know why you're here." That's when he turns serious. He steps up close to her, his tone dropping. "So, what's the plan then, huh? How much are we talking about?" And then she says it, clear as day, in this cold, calculating voice that I almost don't recognize. $500,000. All we have to do is make sure he's gone. It hits me like a punch to the gut. $500,000, that's my life insurance. She's literally got my death calculated down to dollars and cents. Green watches me as I stare, slack-jawed, at the screen. He doesn't say a word, letting it all sink in. I want to look away, but I can't. I need to know just how far she went with this. They go on talking, laying out the details as if they're planning a weekend getaway. She tells him exactly when I'll be home, tells him to make it look like an accident. Jimmy nods, smiling like he's done this a dozen times before. Then he says, "And what do I get out of this?" with this low chuckle that makes my skin crawl. She smirks and steps closer to him, running her hand along his arm in a way that's sickeningly familiar. They kiss, right there in my living room. It's all so casual, like they're rehearsing lines from a play. I finally look away, my fists clench tight. My knuckles are white, and I realize I've been grinding my teeth. I can barely see straight through the haze of anger and betrayal. Green snaps the laptop shut and clears his throat. "I know this is brutal, Jackson," he says softly. "But this gives us everything we need. We're going to bring her in, and she's not going to walk away from this." For a second, I feel a rush of relief. It's proof, cold, hard proof. But then the reality of it all comes crashing down. I've been left for dead by the one person who was supposed to have my back. And now, it's my turn to figure out how to make sure she pays for every single second of pain she's put me through. After watching that video, the pain takes a back seat. Now, it's pure adrenaline, and all I want is to see Julia behind bars. But Green knows this isn't over yet. "Here's the thing," Green says, folding his hands like he's considering his words. "Jimmy the Ham, he's still out there. The guy slipped off our radar, and Julia? She's likely aware we're onto her." I don't respond right away. My mind's buzzing with images of that video, the way Julia looked at him, the way she coldly talked about my death. Green picks up on it and he leans in, lowering his voice. "If we're gonna get them both, we'll need to play this smart," he says, as if reading my mind. Jimmy's a pro at disappearing. He knows how to evade us. Julia's likely scrambling now, probably figuring out her next move. But we have a window here, a short one. I nod, trying to shake off the shock and focus on the plan. "What's the next step?" "We'll start by picking her up," he explains, his tone firm and calm, like he's done this 1,000 times. "If she's cornered, she'll turn on Jimmy. But we have to make sure she doesn't slip away first." It's weird, but I feel a flicker of something close to satisfaction. Green's serious, determined. He's treating this like a priority, and there's a small comfort in knowing he's on my side. He fills me in on the details of how they're planning to intercept Julia before she can bolt. They've already flagged her credit cards, her phone, even her passport. The whole 9 yards. She won't get far. Green pauses, glancing at me with a look that's half caution, half understanding. "Jackson, once she's in custody, it could get rough. She's likely going to try to deny everything, twist the story. You need to be prepared." I almost laugh. Prepared? After everything I've just seen, heard, and felt, I'm ready for whatever she has to throw at me. "What can I do to help?" I ask. A small smile tugs at the corner of Green's mouth. Just stay safe. We'll handle Julia. Once we get her in, she'll talk. Jimmy's the one we'll need you to help with, especially since he's still out there. I try to sit up, pushing past the aches in my body. You're saying you want to use me as bait? It's risky, no doubt about it, but if it means catching Jimmy, I'm in. Green's silent for a moment, his gaze steady, calculating. Let's get Julia first. See how she holds up. If we can't draw him out, we may need to consider alternatives. He doesn't say it outright, but I get it. Jimmy's not the type to let things go. If he knows I'm alive, he might come looking to finish what he started. That gives me a sick sense of satisfaction because now, I'm the one waiting for him. With a deep breath, I nod, finally feeling some control over this nightmare. I know the risks, but I'm ready to see this through. Green pats my shoulder, and as he leaves, he says, "We'll be in touch soon, Jackson. Just rest up. Things are about to get interesting." As I lie back in bed, staring at the ceiling, I can feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface. It's no longer just about survival. Now it's about justice. The next morning, I'm barely awake when Green's back at my bedside, looking a bit rough around the edges. He doesn't even sit down, just dives right in, giving me a quick nod as he leans against the wall. "We've got her," he says, straightening up a bit. "Julia's in custody. We picked her up at the airport this morning." I feel a jolt, somewhere between satisfaction and disbelief. I hadn't expected it to happen so fast. Green fills me in on the details. Julia had been trying to catch a last-minute flight, no doubt trying to escape town. The officers at the airport watched her like hawks, and she didn't see them coming. The second they approached, she tried to play it cool, acting clueless, saying something about a business trip. But when they mentioned the charges, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, her expression apparently froze. She didn't argue, didn't struggle, she just went stone-cold silent as they cuffed her. But it gets better. Green tells me that in the short time they've had her at the station, she's already tried her hand at some ridiculous stories. First, she claimed I'd fallen down the stairs on my own, that she'd found me after the fact. When that didn't fly, she tried to spin it as self-defense, painting herself as the victim. And when the detectives brought up Jimmy, she shifted tactics, saying he was just a friend. A friend who happened to be around and overreacted when he saw her struggling with me. I almost laugh, even though every word Green says stings. The woman I thought I knew, the person I trusted, she's twisting and bending the truth like some kind of cheap con artist. But Green's not fazed, he tells me this is all standard procedure. She's grasping at straws, hoping for anything that might stick. Jimmy's still a ghost, though, Green admits. We're keeping an eye out, but he's slippery. Hearing Jimmy's still out there brings a chill down my spine. Green's team is watching her phone records, trying to see if Jimmy reaches out. They've even set a plan for keeping my hospital room secure, just in case he tries to pay me a visit. But as Green explains all this, I'm not scared, I'm just ready. Then Green leans in, his voice lowering a notch. "There's one more thing you need to know. Julia's asking for you. She claims she wants to explain." The thought of facing her, of hearing her voice after everything, sends a wave of anger through me. But at the same time, part of me wants to go. I want to see her try to spin this web of lies to my face, to watch her squirm as she realizes there's no escape. I take a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I'll go. I want to hear what she has to say." Green looks at me for a moment, maybe checking to see if I'm sure. Then he nods, and a few hours later, they arrange to take me down to the station. By the time I'm settled in a chair across from her in the interrogation room, Julia's already sitting there, hands cuffed in front of her, eyes darting between me and the two-way mirror on the wall. She's done up a bit, probably hoping to look innocent, but I can see the cracks. Her makeup can't hide the nerves or the anger simmering behind those eyes. "Jackson," she says, her voice too soft, too fake. "This is all a misunderstanding. You know me? I almost laugh. You're gonna have to try harder than that, Julia." She stares at me for a second, like she's sizing me up, deciding which version of her story to use. Then she sighs, slumping just a bit, as if she's given up the pretense. "Look, I didn't mean for things to go this way," she begins, her voice dripping with practiced regret. Jimmy got out of control. I didn't realize he'd do. My fists clench under the table, but I force myself to keep a straight face. You didn't realize? So, hiring him to kill me was an accident. Her eyes flicker just for a second. Then she goes right back to her act. Jackson, you have to understand. I was desperate. Things between us weren't working, and then there was the money. I just thought. I don't know, I thought it would be easy. I lean in, my voice low. Easy? You thought killing me would be easy? She opens her mouth but closes it, realizing she's caught. And in that moment, I see the real Julia, not the mask she's been hiding behind all these years. She's cold, calculated, but right now, she's cornered. There's no excuse, no sympathy left to save her. Julia, whatever story you think you can spin, it won't work, I say, keeping my voice steady. You're done. And when they find Jimmy? So is he. For the first time, I see real fear in her eyes. She knows her game is over, and as I stand to leave, I feel the weight of everything I've lost. But walking out, I feel a strange sense of freedom, too. I've faced her, heard her lies, and now, it's time for her to face the consequences. After that showdown with Julia, I leave the station feeling like I've just walked through fire. Seeing her try to manipulate me, watching her cold, calculating mask crack. Yeah, it was brutal, but also strangely freeing. She can't hurt me anymore. Not in the way she did. Green's there as I leave, and he pats me on the back, guiding me to a quiet corner of the station where we can talk. You did good in there, he says, his voice steady and reassuring. People like Julia, they don't expect to be called out by the people they hurt. They think they're untouchable. I nod, absorbing his words. It feels good to be seen, to have someone who understands what it's like to face down betrayal like that. But there's one thing gnawing at me, and I can't let it go. What happens now? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Green crosses his arms, a thoughtful look on his face. Well, Julia's not going anywhere. She's stuck in a holding cell, and we're charging her with attempted murder and conspiracy. She'll have a lawyer, of course, but with the evidence we have, her chances don't look good. He pauses, a shadow crossing his expression. Jimmy, though, he's a different story. Until we find him, there's always a risk. That brings me right back to reality. Jimmy's still out there, and if he knows Julia's locked up, he's probably furious. He's got nothing to lose, which makes him dangerous. Green must see the worry in my face because he gives me a firm look. Listen, Jackson, we're keeping you under close watch. You won't be alone until we get this guy, all right? I try to take comfort in that, but it's hard to shake the feeling that Jimmy's somewhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his moment. And something about him, the calmness he had in that video, the way he treated my house like it was his own, it leaves a chill in me that's hard to shake. Green tells me they're doubling my hospital security, placing officers at my door around the clock. I nod, trying to let that settle me, but I know I'll be looking over my shoulder until this nightmare is over. A day passes, then two. Julia stays in custody, and every update Green brings me sounds better. More evidence, more witnesses, even traces of Jimmy's movements from his credit card usage. But it's on the third day that everything shifts. I'm alone in my hospital room, flipping through the channels, trying to focus on anything that isn't related to my broken life. Then, there's a soft knock on my door. I look up, expecting another nurse or maybe Green with an update. But it's not a cop or a nurse. It's a young woman, dressed in plain clothes, a little nervous looking, with a police badge hanging from her neck. Mr. Neely, she says, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. I'm Officer Reed. I was told to bring you some news about Jimmy. My heart skips a beat, and I sit up a little straighter. They found him? She nods, though her expression is serious. He tried to use an ATM in a small town just outside the city limits. One of our undercover officers spotted him. He's been on the move, changing locations, trying to stay off the grid. I wait, hanging on to her every word, feeling the tension rise with each second. We're closing in, she says, a touch of determination in her voice. But he's slippery. He left the ATM as soon as he spotted the officer, so we're keeping a close eye on the area, hoping he'll slip up. There's a pause, a small flicker of hope trying to take root in me. Maybe, just maybe, they'll catch him before he can cause any more damage. But then Officer Reed's face shifts, like she's hesitating to say something else. One more thing, Mr. Neely. Jimmy's been seen talking to some folks in the area. People who don't ask too many questions. He might be looking for someone to help him finish the job. The air seems to grow heavy as her words sink in. I realize I'm gripping the bedsheets, my knuckles white. She tries to offer a reassuring smile. We're not letting him get close, Mr. Neely. I just wanted you to be aware of the situation. We'll find him, and we'll make sure he's locked up where he can't hurt anyone. I nod, grateful for her honesty, but the chill in my spine doesn't go away. Jimmy's still out there, still hunting. But if he thinks he's gonna get the last word, he's got another thing coming. As Officer Reed leaves, I stare out the hospital window, the city lights casting a dim glow in the night. Jimmy may be out there lurking, but so am I. And as soon as I'm back on my feet, I'm ready to end this once and for all. The night after Officer Reed's visit, sleep is nearly impossible. Every creak, every shadow feels like Jimmy slipping through the cracks. I keep glancing toward the hospital room door, where the officers are stationed. Logically, I know I'm safe, but logic doesn't calm the constant hum of dread under my skin. Early in the morning, Detective Green shows up again, looking even more exhausted than last time. He takes the chair next to my bed and runs a hand over his face before looking at me. Jimmy's still moving around, he says, not bothering to ease into it. We had him near one of his old haunts downtown, but he slipped away again. It's only a matter of time. Something in his voice makes me sit up straighter. But he's still out there. You're sure he knows I'm alive? Green nods. We've had our ears on the ground, and it's clear Jimmy knows you're not dead. He was overheard asking questions, about you, about the hospital. He pauses, meeting my gaze with a steadiness that feels like a warning. And he's mad, Jackson. Really mad. I swallow, but the fear turns into something more like determination. Then let him come. Green's eyes narrow, studying me. We're not gonna make this easy for him. But I need to be real with you, Jackson. There's only so much we can control. Jimmy's got connections. He's resourceful. And he's not just running, he's circling back, trying to figure out a way to get to you. The weight of Green's words settles in my chest, heavy but grounding. I'm angry, yeah, but underneath the anger is this raw need for survival. I won't go down without a fight, not after everything I've been through. So what do we do? I ask, gripping the bed rail as I force myself to keep calm. Green sighs and leans forward. We've got a plan, but it'll take some guts. We need to make Jimmy believe he's got the upper hand, let him think he can get to you. We'll give him a bait. I feel a chill run through me. Bait? Green nods slowly. We're going to move you to a different location, somewhere he thinks he can reach you. But every inch of that place will be covered. We'll have eyes on him the second he walks in. It's risky. I know it, Green knows it, but it's our best shot at stopping Jimmy for good. I take a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm in, I say, my voice firm. Green nods, then lays out the details. It's a small, underused clinic just on the outskirts of town, with rooms that look like they've been abandoned for years. They'll transfer me there with minimal security, hoping Jimmy will catch wind of the move. I'd be alone in the room, but every exit and entrance would be wired, officers hidden in places Jimmy won't even think to look. Jackson, this is as real as it gets, Green warns me, his expression deadly serious. If you're not up for this, say the word, and we'll find another way. But I shake my head. After everything Julia and Jimmy have put me through, I can't just sit here and wait for him to strike. I need to face him. The transfer goes down that night. It's a quiet, tense drive through back roads, the only sound the steady hum of the car engine and the occasional crackle from Green's police radio. I'm in the back seat, my eyes locked on the empty streets, half expecting to see Jimmy's face in every passing shadow. We finally reach the clinic, an old building with faded paint and dark windows. Green escorts me inside, and I'm settled into a small room with just a bed, a chair, and one bare light bulb hanging overhead. It's cold, clinical, like something out of a ghost story. I sit on the edge of the bed, my mind racing, waiting for the plan to unfold. The officers take their places, hidden in nearby rooms, ready to strike the second Jimmy shows up. Green stays close, just outside the door, his voice low as he radios updates to the team. Hours pass, the silence stretching until it feels like the walls are pressing in. I'm tense, every nerve on edge, waiting for the sound of footsteps. Then around midnight I hear it. The faintest sound of a door creaking open down the hall. My heart pounds in my chest as footsteps echo, slow and calculated, moving closer. I hold my breath, gripping the edge of the bed so hard my knuckles turn white. Jimmy's coming. The footsteps stop just outside my door, and the air goes still, thick with tension. I feel a surge of adrenaline, every muscle taut as I brace myself. There's a long pause, then the door handle turns, slowly, almost silently, and the door creaks open. And there he is. Jimmy the Ham, standing in the doorway, his shadow cast long and menacing against the wall. His eyes narrow as he takes me in, lying there, just like he left me before. He steps forward, smirking, like he's already won. Didn't think you'd survive, did you? He sneers, his voice low and dangerous. I don't answer. I just stare at him, keeping my expression calm, unafraid. The fear's gone now. All that's left is resolve. He steps closer, pulling something out from behind his back. A knife, its blade catching the dim light. Should have finished you off the first time, he mutters, stepping right up to the bed. I let him get close enough that he thinks he's got me. And then, just as he raises the knife, Green bursts into the room with his team, guns drawn, shouting commands. Jimmy freezes, his eyes wide with shock as he realizes he's been cornered. Drop the weapon. Green shouts, his voice echoing through the small room. Jimmy hesitates, his grip on the knife tightening as he glances between me and the officers surrounding him. For a second, I think he might try to lunge, but then he drops the knife, his shoulders slumping as he finally surrenders. The officers cuff him and haul him out, his face twisted in rage and frustration. And as they drag him away, he looks back at me, hatred burning in his eyes. You got lucky, Neely, he snarls. But this isn't over. But I know it is. For the first time, I feel a weight lift off me, a sense of finality. Jimmy's done, Julia's in custody, and after everything they put me through, I'm still here. Green comes over, clapping a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Jackson, he says, a small smile breaking through his tired expression. You did it. I nod, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. It's over. The next morning, I'm finally back in the hospital, but this time, it feels different. There's no more lurking threat, no shadows at the door. Jimmy's locked up, Julia's facing charges, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I feel a strange sense of calm. Green stops by with a coffee in hand, giving me an approving nod. How's it feel, Jackson? Knowing they're both out of your life for good? I let out a slow breath, trying to find the words. It's strange. Like I've been holding my breath this whole time, and now I can finally breathe. Green chuckles, a weary sound, but there's pride in his eyes. You handled it like a champ. Not everyone could have done what you did. We talk for a bit, mostly about next steps. Julia's likely facing a long sentence, and with the evidence they've gathered, Jimmy's not getting out anytime soon either. Green assures me they'll handle the rest and that I can focus on rebuilding my life. As he gets up to leave, Green looks back, his expression softening. Take some time to heal, Jackson. You've been through hell. But you made it out. That's something worth holding on to. I nod, watching him go, feeling a sense of relief and closure settle in. I survived the worst of it. Now, it's time to figure out what comes next. After Green leaves, the reality of everything hits me hard. The relief fades, replaced by this gnawing emptiness. My entire life was flipped upside down in less than 2 weeks. Julia's betrayal, Jimmy's attack, all of it feels surreal, like it happened to someone else. Over the next few days, I get steady visits from hospital staff and a couple of friends who'd heard the news. Each one of them gives me the same look, a mix of pity and disbelief. They don't ask for details, which I'm grateful for. I'm not ready to tell the story, to put it into words for anyone else. One afternoon, Green calls with an update. Julia's lawyer is scrambling, trying to make some sort of plea deal, but with the video evidence and her attempt to flee, it's a long shot. It'll be a while before the trial, but we've got her. You don't need to worry. I try to thank him, but the words come out rough, awkward. There's so much I can't even express, and he gets that, says he's just doing his job. Before he hangs up, he tells me they'll be in touch if anything changes, but I know I won't see him around much now. The case is wrapping up, and so is his involvement in my life. I hang up, sitting there in the silence, realizing this is it. No more detectives, no more late-night stakeouts or hidden cameras. It's just me, left alone to piece my life back together. I'm discharged later that week. When I step outside, the world feels bigger, colder somehow, like everything's changed, and maybe it has. The ride back to my house is quiet, almost unsettling. My buddy, Sam, picks me up. He offers to stay, but I wave him off. I need a minute, I say, not quite meeting his eyes. All right, man. But call if you need anything. He hesitates before driving off, like he's afraid to leave me alone. I stand at my front door, taking it all in. Everything's just as I left it, but somehow it feels like I'm stepping into someone else's life. The walls, the furniture, it's all ours. But now, knowing what happened here, it feels hollow. I finally walk inside, shutting the door behind me. The house smells stale, untouched. Every room has traces of her favorite blanket on the couch, her books stacked on the coffee table. For a moment, I just stand there, letting the weight of everything sink in. Then I go to the living room and sit on the couch. It hits me, all of it, crashing down like a wave. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that the person I loved tried to take everything from me, even my life. I don't realize I'm gripping the edge of the coffee table until my knuckles turn white. After a while, I start moving, clearing out the pieces of her, photos, knickknacks, anything that carries her memory. I stuff it all in a box, shoving it into the closet without a second glance. It's strangely freeing, watching her fade from this space, like I'm reclaiming it piece by piece. When I'm done, I sit back down, the silence filling the house again. It's empty, and there's a loneliness in that, but it's my space now. For the first time, I feel like I can start over, however long that might take. In the days that follow, I fall into a strange rhythm. I wake up, go through the motions, make coffee, sit by the window, stare out at nothing in particular. I try to keep busy, but it's tough when everything around me feels tainted by memories of her. I decide to go back to work sooner than I planned. My boss, Roger, was understanding about the time off, but staying home alone all day isn't helping. The office feels safer somehow, surrounded by people and tasks that don't give me time to think too much. My coworkers look at me with a mix of sympathy and curiosity, but they don't pry. I'm grateful for that. At lunch, Sam joins me in the break room, handing me a sandwich like old times. He's the one person who doesn't treat me any differently, doesn't walk on eggshells around me. He just sits with me, cracks a few jokes, and reminds me of normal things, like the game next Friday, the cookout he's planning, all the regular life stuff that feels far away right now. I know it's been rough, but you're doing good, man, he says, clapping a hand on my shoulder. And look, the worst of it is behind you. I nod, taking a bite of the sandwich, not trusting myself to speak. There's a truth in his words that settles me, if only for a moment. I'm out of the storm. Now, it's just about figuring out how to live in its aftermath. When I get home that night, the silence doesn't feel quite as heavy. It's a small thing, but it feels like a step forward, and right now, that's enough. After a few days back at work, I start tackling what I've been avoiding, the memories. I'd shoved Julia's things into that closet, but I know I can't leave them there forever. One evening, I grab the box and set it on the coffee table, forcing myself to confront everything inside. The first thing I pull out is a framed photo of us on our last anniversary, smiling like any happy couple. It feels like looking at strangers, a different life. I don't even recognize myself in that picture. I put it face down on the table. Then, there's her perfume bottle, half empty. I almost toss it, but a strange, twisted part of me wants to remember what she smelled like. I set it aside, telling myself I'll get rid of it later. There's a stack of birthday cards, love notes, the things that once felt real, important. Now, they feel like props in some long-running show I was too blind to see through. I skim a few of her notes, all that forever promises, the inside jokes, the talk about building a future together. It feels hollow, every word tainted by the truth I know now. By the time I reach the bottom of the box, I'm drained. I shove most of it back inside, taping it shut. One day, I'll throw it all out, but right now, I'm not ready. I carry the box out to the garage, leaving it on a shelf, out of sight. As I close the door, I feel like I've packed away a piece of my old life. It's a strange feeling, painful but necessary. With Julia's things out of sight, something shifts. My home feels less like a crime scene and more like, well, my own space. I start making small changes, almost instinctively. Rearranging furniture, putting up new photos, even buying a couple of cheap plants to bring some life back into the place. Each small change feels like a step forward, like I'm claiming this space again. One night, Sam swings by unannounced, holding a six-pack and a takeout pizza. He takes one look around and whistles. "Look at you, Neely. Turning this place around." I laugh, a real laugh, maybe for the first time in weeks. Figured it was time. Can't live in a ghost house forever. We sit around eating pizza and watching some mindless TV, the kind of stuff I used to do before my life became a bad thriller. Sam doesn't bring up Julia or the case. Instead, he talks about his own stuff, work, his new dog, a road trip he's planning. And for once, I don't feel like the guy everyone's pitying. I feel normal. After Sam leaves, I look around the living room. The place feels lighter, like I've opened a window in a dusty room and let fresh air in. There's still a long way to go, and I know there are parts of me that might never fully heal. But for the first time, I feel a hint of freedom, like the past is loosening its grip just enough for me to imagine a future. And as I sit there in the quiet, I realize I'm starting to look forward, not back. In the weeks that follow, I keep leaning into the changes, small steps that help me feel more like myself. I start running in the mornings, just around the neighborhood at first. The cool air clears my head, gives me something solid to hold on to. Some days are better than others, but each run feels like a bit of progress, like I'm leaving pieces of the past on the pavement. At work, people stop looking at me with that careful sympathy. Sam's jokes get a little sharper, and my boss piles on the projects again. It's exactly what I need, routine, normalcy. Even when I stumble, even when memories of the past creep in, I don't feel like they control me anymore. They're just shadows, things I'm learning to live with. One afternoon, I finally decide to open up my social circle again, reaching out to old friends. I hadn't realized how much I'd cut myself off. The first few meetups are awkward, but soon I'm talking and laughing, feeling like a person again. Nobody brings up Julia, nobody talks about the case. It's like a silent agreement, an unspoken respect for where I'm at. On a Saturday morning, I stop by a local cafe I used to love. It's nothing special, just a small place with decent coffee and a seat by the window. I order my usual, sit down and look around watching people come and go. I feel at peace, the weight of everything finally settling into a place that feels manageable. As I sip my coffee, I realize something. I'm okay. Not healed, not whole, but okay. And for the first time in a long time, I feel ready to move on, whatever that might look like. One evening, a few months after everything, I decide it's time to take a bigger step. My therapist, a new one Sam recommended, mentioned something about truly closing chapters, about how healing often needs action. She didn't mean rushing things, just finding ways to mark the end of the hardest parts of life and stepping forward from them. After some thought, I decide to sell the house. The idea hits me out of nowhere, but the more I sit with it, the more right it feels. This house holds everything, every memory, every betrayal, every corner tainted by what happened. I thought I could clear it out, start fresh within these same walls, but maybe starting fresh means more than just rearranging furniture. It's time for new walls, a new beginning that doesn't hold pieces of the life Julia left shattered. The process moves fast once I make up my mind. Sam helps me sort through what's worth keeping and what's better left behind. It's strange, digging through boxes and drawers, finding things that were once part of a shared life but now feel like remnants of a person I barely recognize. I donate most of it, just bags and bags of stuff I don't need to carry forward. Anything that still reminds me too much of her, I leave behind, almost like an offering to the past, like I'm acknowledging its weight and then letting it go. On the day of the open house, I leave early. I can't bear to watch strangers wandering through, peeking into rooms that hold my entire history. Instead, I go to the cafe, the one with the corner seat by the window. I sit there, sipping my coffee, watching the world outside, feeling the strangest mix of relief and sadness. This isn't easy, saying goodbye to what I once thought was a forever home, but it's necessary. About a week later, the house is officially sold. It feels surreal handing over the keys, walking out of that front door one last time. Sam's waiting for me on the curb, his truck packed with the boxes of things I decided to keep. I glance back at the house, one final look, and then turn away. The next few weeks are a whirlwind of moving into a small apartment on the other side of town. It's nothing special, but it's mine. No ghosts here, no memories lurking in the corners. Just an empty space waiting to become something new. I buy a second-hand couch, a couple of cheap lamps, and set up a desk by the window where I can watch the world move around me. It's quieter here, simpler, and that's exactly what I need. One night, as I'm unpacking, I come across a box I didn't recognize. I open it up to find a few things Sam must have packed for me: old photos, a couple of keepsakes from family vacations, and a single framed picture of me from years ago, a time when I was younger, wide-eyed, and probably a little naive. I stare at it for a long time, wondering who that guy even is anymore. But then I realize he's still me, still here, just carrying a bit more now, a little older and a little wiser. A few weeks pass, and I start to settle into the rhythms of this new life. I find a new running route by the park, start cooking for myself instead of grabbing takeout, and even pick up a new hobby: sketching. I'm no artist, but there's something about putting pen to paper that feels grounding, like I'm creating something that's fully mine. One Saturday morning, I'm back at the cafe, sketchbook in hand, sipping my coffee, when a woman at the next table glances over and smiles. "That's pretty good," she says, nodding at my sketch of the street outside. "You must be an artist?" I laugh, shaking my head. "Far from it. Just something I picked up recently." She smiles again, warmer this time, and we start talking. Her name's Rachel, and she's easy to talk to, with a laugh that feels genuine and a calm that's somehow contagious. We chat about nothing and everything: the neighborhood, books we're reading, favorite coffee spots in town. When she leaves, she gives a small wave and says, "Maybe I'll see you here again sometime." As I watch her walk away, I feel a strange spark, a flicker of something I haven't felt in a long time. I don't know if it's hope, or the beginning of something, or just the feeling of finally being free. But whatever it is, it feels good. In the days that follow, I find myself back at that cafe, sketching by the window, watching the world move outside, letting life unfold in its own way. And for the first time since everything happened, I feel like I'm not running from the past anymore. I'm walking forward, one day at a time, ready for whatever's next.